I shave my head every day, right? Because I'm old and bald. And I used to use the best razor on the market until I found out that the best razor in the market, the company that manufactured it, actually product tested on animals.
Hi, before we get on with this week's episode, I'd just like to say that Automated Creative are hiring. We're looking for a senior client lead, as well as 2 client leads, as well as a head of growth, a senior Python developer, and a React TypeScript developer. So if you would like to join a business that is absolutely crazy about the intersection of advertising and technology, then please give us an email at hiring@automatedcreative.net. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a weekly show where I have the privilege of speaking to some of the most exciting people in the industry. And this week is no different. I'm on a call with Duarte Garrido, head of social at Coca-Cola HBC. So DG, you tell me I can refer to you as, or Duarte, can you give us a bit of background on who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Tom, and kudos on the pronunciation. It was pretty spot on. So a little bit of background on me. I'm Portuguese, as you can probably tell from my weirdly pronounced name. I was born in Lisbon. I came to the UK about 8 years ago to study international journalism in Cornwall. And from then I moved on to Reuters, where I became a reporter and then a producer and an editor. And that took me to Sky News, where I managed and edited their entertainment section of the digital website. And my foray into social media was actually at Sky, where I noticed that the articles and the content that we were creating on a digital desk was then being distributed and amplified by the social media desk, which was working in a silo, literally on another part of the room. So me at the time, when I was writing articles, I was creating videos, I was editing other people's content as well. So I decided to just reach out to the social media team and sort of bridge that gap. And that was really, the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And eventually that led me to lead the daily operations on the social media desk at Sky News, and which was an amazing time. I had a lot of fun there. And it was, about a year and a half after that, I got sort of a very peculiar invitation to join the biggest tobacco company in the world, Philip Morris International, as their deputy head of global social media, to basically assemble a content team from scratch. And, you may be thinking, why would someone want to join a big tobacco company? And that was my thoughts exactly. But the peg here was that Philip Morris International was pledging to stop selling cigarettes and becoming a science and technology-driven company. So that radical transformation, that sort of unforced disruption, was an incredible communications challenge. And from a social media point of view, it was quite unique. So I took it. And I was there for nearly 3 years. I built a team from scratch. I built a content studio from scratch. Well, I helped build a content studio from scratch and a social media operation. We empowered over 70 markets to launch their own social media accounts and do their own social media work. So that was a lot of fun. And it was I would say my biggest social media foray up until now. And now I'm at Coca-Cola HBC, where I'm global head of social. And again, I'm starting an operation pretty much from scratch. And it's been fun so far.
And we were introduced last week, I think, by the Future Conference, and that's FUTR.today. And you're speaking there on the 1st of July. What are you going to be covering?
That's correct. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I think the topic is going to be how to leverage social media to build trust. And trust is something that that I have a lot of interest on, and how to build trust, aligning on a values-based approach. So that's going to be the key topic of my keynote at Future.
So across that interesting career, what has been a new belief or behavior that's helped you have a better work life?
It's a really interesting question. I'm going to go with behavior here rather than belief. And that's because I always tend to incline more towards actions than intentions. Like you're better off changing small little things in your routine every day than having, great ambitions about the kind of marketer you want to become, or the kind of father, the kind of husband, or what have you. There's this old Portuguese saying that I don't think it translates very well, but it goes something like, hell is brimming with good intentions. So I tend to rather live, incrementally and through behaviors. But anyway, I digress. Well, the question was, in the last 5 years, which new belief or behavior has improved the quality of my work life? So I'm going to go with behavior. And a new behavior that has improved the quality of my work life has been, I would say, learning through podcasts, which is quite meta since I'm speaking on one. But that has radically revolutionized not just my life, my personal life, but also my career.
So, obvious question: how do you learn through podcasts?
That's a good question. I mean, my foray into podcasts started a couple of years ago. I mean, obviously I'd heard podcasts before, but I really got into it as part of my daily routine about 2 years ago, where I started waking up religiously just before 6 a.m. for no reason, without an alarm clock. I think it's just getting old. Will do that to you. And I now wake up about an hour before even my young daughter and my wife wake up. So what I do is I get my earbuds, I get my Tibetan Terrier, Bayou, and we go for our 6 a.m. morning walk in the park in London. And through that morning walk, which takes us about an hour, I listen to a podcast of, an industry podcast. And that is...
So which ones? What are your go-tos?
Oh, that's a great question. So I've got a few favorite ones. My favorite one by far is the Cmo Podcast from Jim Stengel.
Yeah, very good.
I love it because it's, I love podcasts where I can listen to my peers, but the Cmo Podcast is me listening to my gurus. So it's even more valuable to me. I have a few others that I really like. I love Social Pros.
Social Pros, yeah. I'm writing all these down if I haven't.
Yeah, Social Pros is a really great one. B2B Marketing is a great one as well, the one with Sarah Goodall. Obviously, Shiny New Object. I listen to it religiously.
I'm not
even joking. This is absolutely true. This is absolutely true. I have a long list of very good podcasts. I don't mind sending them to you after if you're interested.
Yeah, well, maybe we could share them like on the LinkedIn post or something, or the blog post that accompanies this. So
that's a deal.
So that is another time. I'll tell you about my morning routine as well. This and how relatable that is. So podcasts, great behavior, and I love that. Hell is brimming with good intentions. That's funny. So the next one is, what is your top marketing tip? What is the bit of advice that you give your team most often, or people who would ask for advice? What is that kind of nugget?
So the best marketing tip, I don't know if I've ever actually passed it to anyone, but it's a marketing tip that I received when I wasn't yet a marketer, but that I've applied throughout my career. And it's proved incredibly valuable. It is start with cake. And it's a weird one, but let me tell you a story about it. It was given to me by my mentor, unassigned mentor, by the way. I've just sort of, I chose him as my mentor. When I started off at Reuters in my internship as a young journalist, I think it was my first day there. I was, still learning the ropes and trying to get a sense of what the company was about and what the job was about. And I lacked confidence, obviously, full of imposter syndrome. And I met Axel Threlfall, who was Reuters editor at large, who is still Reuters editor at large, because this, really important guy in the company, Reuters face in any big conference in Davos, etc. And he's this amazing full of life character. And he, for absolutely no reason, just got, sort of said to me in my first day if I wanted to take the train back with him at the end of the day. And I did. And he just said, you're this, I can tell that you're an intelligent guy, that you're an ambitious guy, that you're friendly and that people like you. And that's amazing. He told me, I'm sure that you'll have a fantastic career ahead of you and that you'll stay at Reuters and get a permanent gig here. My only piece of advice is, just be friendly, smile, and bring cake. People love cake. And I did, a couple of days after, I think it wasn't the next day, but I think a couple of days after, I baked an orange cake at home and I brought it and I took it and everyone had a slice. And that sort of, it worked for some reason. It was this magical piece of, goodness at the center of the room. And people just started passing by, grabbing a piece and chatting to me and getting to know me. And I feel like that changed my whole approach to working in an office environment, to working in a team, to being part of something, to being part of a culture, which is, start with something sweet, get people in, start talking to them, be friendly. And that's something that I actually, as a marketer, apply almost metaphysically to everything I do. Even, I think business meetings should always start with you going around the room and asking people something great that they've done over the weekend, or something funny that happened to them. Just something that will break the ice, that will get people to talk about something else than work, and that will get them sort of warmed up and friendlier to each other. And I feel like whatever conflict comes from the brainstorm or from the strategic meeting, it's going to be softened by that proverbial sort of piece of cake.
Such a great bit of advice, and thanks for sharing that story. Just realizing there's absolutely zero cake at the start of my own podcast. But anyway, moving on. This week, we are brought to you by Attest. Attest is a consumer research platform that enables brands to make customer understanding a competitive advantage with continuous insights. By combining unparalleled speed and data quality with on-demand research guidance, the platform makes it simple and fast to uncover opportunities with consumer data and grow without guesswork. So we're going to talk now about your shiny new object, which is values as a driver of consumer action. So I think I know what some of those words mean, but as a sentence and as a shiny new object, what does that mean to you and why have you chosen it today?
I chose that as a shiny new object because I could have chosen the latest, social media software that I'm using that's been proving valuable, or the latest marketing technique that I've read and tried out. But actually, this is something quite metaphysical and intangible to some performance marketers, not so much to the CMO level, because they're quite akin to the role that words like purpose and trust and values actually matter when it comes to customer intention and customer action. But I'm going to start with actually one episode from the CMO podcast with Jim Stengel, in which he brought in Lorraine Toohill and Marvin Chow from Google. And they were explaining how Google was evolving from a product marketing focused organization, which sort of had been since its inception almost, to focus more on brand marketing, on building a brand narrative to tie the company together. And this was the episode that got me thinking past purpose, because I feel like we're at a point as marketers where purpose is a bit of a given. If as an organization or as a marketer or as a CMO, you don't realize the value that purpose has, then I'm afraid you're far behind and you're a lost cause. So This episode actually got me thinking beyond purpose, and I'll tell you why. Basically, Google, if you think about it, it's a pretty brandless company, right? Even with all its logos and color palettes and company culture and lingo, what is Google to the average consumer? And I'm throwing this question back at you. What is the one thing that comes to mind when you think Google?
Search.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. I was hoping you'd say that, because search is not what Google is. Search is actually one product of Google, and it's actually a product in decline, to be honest. I don't know if you've heard of a small company going around called Neeva. That's been it's a small startup that's rivaling Google. It's search without ads. It's been catapulted by Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn, and by other venture capitalists. So this is, Google as a search engine is going to have a lot of trouble in the future. But exactly, to the average consumer, Google as a brand is limited to one of its flagship products, search. So Google has focused so much on building great products and giving those products autonomy to fail or succeed, they're known for that they actually forgot how to build a brand that will stand the test of time, even when new agile competitors come in to disrupt the market, right? And then I started thinking, okay, so what is Google's brand purpose? They must have one, right? And I went and did some research. And I was listening to this specific episode, and I remember that Lorraine Tuhill, Google CMO, she kept talking about helpfulness. Google is helpful. We're helpful. And I was like, okay, well, this is great as a brand purpose if you're a Google engineer or if you're a product manager, right? Because basically what it does is it gives you direction for product building, Everything that Google does needs to be helpful to the consumer. We're a consumer-centered company. That's awesome. That's great. That even helps build culture within the company. But ultimately, what does that do for the consumer? As an average consumer, are you going to choose to buy a product from a company because the company is helpful? I mean, that isn't a value. That's a utilitarian purpose, right? So that serves culture, that serves product, but that does nothing to capture demand. That does nothing to create demand. And if you look at these big research papers from Deloitte Digital, on trust, and you look at Edelman's Trust Barometer and Accenture's, all these companies have done their consumer research, and they came up with consumers will now buy products based on values. And the word value kept coming in. And I started thinking, okay, values. Being helpful isn't a value. And then I looked at another industry that's being threatened by younger sort of startup type companies. Banking, right? We have these big incumbents. And I looked at, let me look at HBC, which is the UK's biggest, incumbent. And their purpose is to open up a world of opportunity. Again, this isn't a value-based purpose, right? This does nothing to capture the interest of the consumer. And then I looked at Revolut, right? This new agile startup that's come in to the fintech world to disrupt. And they don't even talk about purpose. They go straight into their brand values. They are think deeper, stronger together, never settle. Right? So what does this tell you? Togetherness, right? Ambition, thrive. So these are values, right? And you look at a smaller bank like Standard Chartered, for instance, they actually nailed it. Their brand purpose is here for good. And that's smart in two ways. One, because, it's here for good in terms of here for good to stay. So it says consistency, but also good as in a value, a human value that people can rally behind. So we know that the coming generations, and even millennials to some extent, will choose purpose over product, right? They don't care that your product is the best product in the market if your company's values don't align with their values. So having a values-based approach to your purpose is absolutely essential. This is actually how you build a great brand DNA. And this is how you ensure that your brand remains relevant in the future. And it's even more important for these big incumbents who are often oblivious to the fact that they are already in decline because future generations distrust them, right? So they need to look at their brand DNA and think, what are our values as a brand that can speak to human values, that can speak to this new generation, that this new generation can understand, take them as their own, rally behind. And for instance, in the case of Google, if they want to sell their Google Pixel, if they want to get Gen Z out of the iPhone, of the Apple wall garden, right, which they are in now, we know that Apple isn't a good company, right? Apple sticks consumers behind their wall garden through closed systems. And they did that very, very well. But if Google wants to disrupt that and take customers away from Apple's iPhones into the Google Pixel, they're not going to do that by selling a product that's helpful. They need to speak to this generation's core values. And then Gen Z will buy the Google Pixel, not because it's a luxury item like the iPhone, not because it's a helpful product, but because they see Google as a company for good, unlike Apple. So they speak to the values of the consumer and profit will follow.
So many things, so many questions I'd like to ask you, but we're out of time, unfortunately. So we may have to have a follow-up episode at some point. So I'm going to try and ask a short question. Hopefully there'll be a short-ish answer to it. So do values matter at the point of purchase?
Of course. Absolutely.
And what is your data point for this?
That's exactly what I was talking about when I was referencing the Edelman Trust Barometer and Deloitte Digital's research on trust. They actually look at buyer intent, and they come up with exactly
buyer intent, claimed behavior, claimed beliefs. Because in our practice as a business, we don't see that. When it comes to looking at actual behavior, actual purchase, actual arrival at site and CRM capture and stuff, that stuff doesn't work. However, I'm not saying it's not important, but I'm just as a provocation that what people claim and what people do is very, very different. And that's the data that we see. So I'm curious to know that, yes, if you're doing a TV spot, yes, you should talk about the values behind your purpose, and you argue that point beautifully. But talking from my own personal experience, when I went to buy a phone the other day, I had no idea what phone to buy. I just don't care. And the person in the shop said, "Which phone do you want?" And I was like, I don't know, which one do you recommend? And what was the price like? The fact that Samsung's values or Google's values or Apple's values were present or not present in my mind didn't matter at all. So the question is what proof do you have that it matters at the point of purchase where things like price, urgency, and deals come in?
It absolutely matters. And I'll tell you what, I'll follow your anecdotal story with one of mine. And by the way, neither of us are the focus here, because we're talking about a generation that's much more values driven and much more eco-conscious than ourselves. But I'll tell you an anecdotal story about my own purchasing habits. As an example, I shave my head every day, right? Because I'm old and bald. And I used to use the best razor on the market until I found out that the best razor in the market, the company that manufactured it, actually product tested on animals. Now, this for me it rings very, very close to my heart, because I'm an animal lover. I'm a dog owner. I will not buy a product from a company that does animal testing. So what I did was I bought a substandard razor that hurts my head every day when I shave. sometimes literally to the point of bleeding, because they are cruelty-free. And I know that this is an anecdotal story, but this is why eco-conscious brands are actually on the rise here. It's not because they've put the best products on the market, Tom. It's because their values are in the right place, and because consumers today, but most importantly, consumers tomorrow, they will buy according to their values, whether that has to do with impact on the environment, on people, on planet, on animals, or even in society in general, and the impact those companies have on our quality of life. Now, trust me, it matters, and it does drive buyer, not just buyer intent, but at point of purchase as well.
Duarte, we have to leave it there. I would love to continue this conversation another time. And as I'm sure there are many listeners who will want to reach out to you. And how do you want them to do that, and where? I
would say LinkedIn is the first port of call. I'm quite active on it. So if you want to look me up on LinkedIn, I'm Duarte Garrido. This is hard to pronounce, but it's easier to search. Duarte. That's my first name. And if you want to contact me on Twitter, I'm at DG on social. And those are by far the two best ways to get hold of me.
Duarte, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the shiny new Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That'd just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.